Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar. We're going to be talking about Strive, and our topic is beginning with the end in mind. So we'll be discussing things that you can get out of Strive and how you can set them up to make that happen. I am Paige Parker and I'm going to be your presenter today. I'm one of the members of the training and implementation team. And also on the call today is Alicia Thomas. Alicia, you want to say hi?
Hello, guys.
So as we are going through today's call, we're going to ask that you use the Q&A window if you have questions that you want to ask or anything that you need to share with us. Alicia is going to be responding to those questions. So you can just use that Q&A window to post anything that you want to say about the questions that you have about today's presentation. If you have questions about something else that's not on today's topic, we're going to ask that you send those in an email to training@eduphoria.net. That way we can kind of keep up with the calls that are, or the questions that are topic related, and we can get back to you on those other questions. Okay, today's objectives are to identify and access data that's relevant to the appraisal process. So some of you may know about some of these data sources. Some of these may be new to you. We're going to talk about evaluating your current appraisal settings, and then hopefully you will walk away ready to assess and execute any necessary changes to your process that will help you get the data out that you want. All right, our core topics today, we're going to start with a couple of questions. What data do you expect? What is it that you're looking for or hoping to get out of the system? What will you do with that data? And who will use that data? So we're going to kind of focus around those questions in the beginning. That's what you want to get out in the end. And we're going to look at some reporting data, some examples of data from reports that we have, and also our appraisal analysis piece, show you some differences and talk about how they're different. We'll also look at the Summative Panel, which is a great way to get all of the data from the entire evaluation process in one place as the appraisers are completing that summative document. And then the majority of our time today will be spent on setting up for success. We'll look at some resources that we have and some suggestions for getting the most out of the system. You want to make sure that you have everything set up for success in the beginning so that you can get those documents out in the end. All right, let's start with reporting data. And before I jump in, I do want to mention that last week we had another webinar that was more in depth on the reports and the appraisal analysis part of this. Today, we're just going to do a quick, here's what you have access to, and we're going to spend more of our time on how do you get set up for that. But I will show you where you can find a link to last week's webinar if you're interested in that and learning more about the different reports and the options that you have. Just as a review, because we did mention this last week as well, we have an article called Suggestions for Running Reports in Strive. And this kind of goes back to those questions: what data do you expect? What are you going to do with it? And who needs to access it? So I put in the Q&A section, if you go and look at the questions, the very first question for today was about links. And I shared all of the links that are going to be in the presentation so that you'll have them today, but you'll also have them after the fact when you get your follow-up email. I'm going to use this one to open up that article and just show you what it's all about. We have a list of all of the reports that we have in our system. It also tells you what the purpose is. So if it's to help appraisers, that means your appraisers are going to be the ones running it. So when you look at the purpose of some of these reports, that might help you to determine who is it that needs to run this report in your system. What data are they looking for? How are you going to use that data, and see if this is the report that's going to be the good fit for you. So we've outlined all of our reports and what they're used for and when we recommend that you run them. And then each one of these is a hyperlink that's going to take you to more information about that specific report, how to run it, screenshots, a little more explanation. So you can always use that initial article to find the different reports that you might want to look for. We have some different kinds of reports. We have some reports that are results oriented. So this is about the results of your appraisal system. I do want to show you, because that example is a document analysis report. So I'm going to go in the system under reports. I'm going to go to appraisal reports and document analysis. And I'm going to pick a summative document. That's just one that has data in it, but it doesn't really matter. Once you have selected the document, and the document analysis report is, as the name indicates, for one document at a time. So it's not one of those comparative reports that I can see multiple things. This is going to show me one document, but I do have multiple ways to view it. I can print the document, which is just going to give me those results, my overall results by dimension. So I can see in 1.1 how many distinguished, how many accomplished, how many proficients, etc. I can also do print the document with percentages by groups, which is actually going to give me a pie chart for each one of those dimensions, as well as those numbers. So I'll have the hard numbers. I'll also have a visual. The third option is to print the document with appraisers. So it's going to go one dimension at a time, but it's going to break it down and say, for appraiser 1, these were the numbers. For appraiser 2, these were the numbers, and it will list all of your appraisers there. That information can be used as one of your tools for determining if calibration is needed, although it's not the only tool that you have, and it's not manipulatable. It comes out in a PDF document, but you'll be able to see all of the numbers for each dimension by appraiser. And then my favorite is exporting to spreadsheets, because then I can get all of the data and I can sort it by appraiser, or I can sort it by campus, or I can sort it however I want to and do whatever comparisons I want. So I can manipulate the data if I get it that way. But that's that one example of the report that I was showing. Here we go. So this is the report in that very first print option, where it just shows me my totals, but I have multiple options by going into document analysis, and those are all going to be results based. We also have some reports that are process based, and this is an example of one of those. So if I'm trying to manage my goals process, the goal summary report is very helpful in that regard. I can see how, all of my teachers on my campuses. I can see how many goals they have written that they have not yet submitted. These might have just been, I'm playing around trying to learn how to write a goal. I can see how many they actually submitted to their appraiser. Some of them haven't submitted one yet. I can see if those appraisers have gone in and done their part and approved the goals, which should happen shortly after the goals are due. And then toward the end of the year, I can see if the goals have been marked complete, which is something that should happen as they're going into that end of year conference. So if the teacher marks their goal complete, then the administrator can say, yes, I agree. And then it's ready to archive. And I can see how many goals have actually been archived. So this is sort of a managing the process report. We also have evaluation status that helps you manage the process, and an evaluation process report that helps you manage. So there are a couple of different reports for different purposes. And again, that question, what are you going to do with the data? How are you going to use it? That kind of determines which report that you're going to look for. In addition to reports, we have an appraisal analysis piece. And appraisal analysis is different from reports because, first of all, it's not printable. It is a dynamic system that you can click and manipulate. Let me look at it this way. Let me change this one setting and look at it this way. Let me change another setting and look at it this way. So you can see multiple ways to use that data. Here's an example of one of those appraisal analysis views. This would be viewing a specific domain or dimension. When I go in to my system to appraisal analysis instead of reports, you can see that I can choose what piece I want to evaluate. And I could look at one individual dimension, or I could look at an entire domain if I choose to do that. Here, I can do some comparison of different types of documents if I want to. I can set my start and end date so I can look at different time frames. And then I can also choose my groups from a lot of different sets of criteria. So I can compare different schools, or I can group schools into a single group. I can look at different appraisee types or different subjects. So if I'm a principal that's in charge of one specific subject area, I might just want to look at those teachers. I can look at grade levels, or I can look at individual appraisers. And I can build 3 groups that I use. In this case, I'm just looking at everybody. I've not grouped anyone in my district. I'm just saying, everybody in my district, show me domain 2, show me what our results are. But you'll notice that I can see not only are the results from the documents that I selected, which in this case is the observation document, but I can also see how many of my teachers have a professional goal that's related to that dimension, and how many of my teachers earned professional development credit that was related to that dimension. And so that's great information for me in looking at, here are our results, and this may be one of the factors related to those results. If I used different settings, this is an example of one where I did group people together. In this case, it could be that each color represents an individual appraiser, and you can compare 3 different appraisers to see how they line up. Are they rating the same way on each of the dimensions? Or it could be that the salmon color is all the elementary appraisers, the goldenrod color is all the middle school appraisers, and the burgundy color is all of the high school appraisers. So I might be looking at 3 different groups of appraisers to see if there is a variation there. But I can use these results to get a lot of information about how my process is going. And then the final thing that I want to look at in terms of getting the data out is when I'm doing that summative appraisal, when I'm doing that end of year conference, I want to look at the data there. And we have a feature called the Summative Panel that helps you do that. Again, I'm going to jump over into the system, and I'm in as a principal right now, so I'm an appraiser. I'm looking at a teacher's document. I have started the summative, so I'm in the summative document right now. This is the evaluation that I'm doing, the summative with SLO. And you'll notice that over on the right-hand side, I see what we call the Summative Panel, which shows the list of all of the dimensions, domains and dimensions. If you're not seeing that when you go into a summative document, you might look at the buttons that are up here. I have one that says hide framework data. And if that gets clicked, then that panel disappears and I'm not going to see the summative panel. If I want to bring it back, all I have to do is click on show framework data and it's going to be back over there. What this is going to help me do is, as I'm scrolling through and trying to determine how I'm going to give that overall rating, this is my end of the year. I'm going to try to figure out what the rating is supposed to be for 1.3, which is knowledge of students. I can click on 1.3 in my panel, and I can see all of the information I have on this teacher for dimension 1.3 for the whole year. I can see the observation data and that this teacher was rated as proficient during the observation. If I had walkthrough data related to this dimension, I would see that as well. I can see that this teacher attended professional development that was related to 1.3. So that may help me determine how much work they have done in that area. And I can also see that this teacher wrote a goal in dimension 1.3, and I can click on that goal, open it up, and see everything that they did with the goal, all the evidence that they've uploaded, all the action items that they put in there, or the action steps that they've taken to help them get to that goal. And I can even see that this teacher thinks that she has completed this goal. And so I would want to look at that evidence and determine if I agree that that goal is in fact completed. So I can see all of that information in the summative panel while I'm doing that summative document. Alicia, are there any questions before I jump into the how do we get there section?
No, not at this time. Everything looks good.
All right. So that's all the information that I want to be able to see. How do I make sure that I can see it? And maybe when you go into your district, you're not seeing some of those things, or you're not sure if you're set up to see those things. So let's talk about what we need to do first. We have a document that's called the Strive Preparation Checklist that we recommend that districts look at and go through this process annually. So this is like an annual review. I'm going to look at everything that goes into setting up for Strive success. So I'm going to go over, I just clicked on the link. And again, that link is in the Q&A section, and you'll also get it when you get your follow-up email. But this is the document that you can use, and you could download a copy of it for your district to use. It just kind of gives you an outline of tasks, things that you need to be thinking about. When are you going to run that archive? Because you want to run the archive before you start making changes to any documents or to the process. Do you need to make any changes to the frameworks that you're using? Do you need to get any changes to your evaluation templates? Is there something that's not working about the templates, or is it difficult to get the data out based on the way the template is created? So all of these things are things for you to be thinking about. It's great if you can develop a committee, and I think that's really the first step, is planning that meeting and identifying who all needs to be part of that conversation, and then figuring out which things do we need to work on during the summer or before our users come back in the fall, so that we're good to go and know we're going to get the data out that we want to be able to get. So again, you can go to our online help guide, click on the Strive button, and there's a section called Strive for Settings Administrators, and that's where you will find a link to this report, and also this tiny URL will get you there. So you have that link as well.
Paige, one
Yes.
thing, I do have a question. Can you show a little bit more about the SLO and how that is tied, like with the student portfolio?
I will be doing that in just a few minutes. We'll get to that section. We're not going to spend a lot of time on portfolios, but we will talk about where you're going to see that information.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so one of the first steps when you're trying to get everything lined out and set up and ready to go is to make sure that your templates are what you want them to be. So you may want to look at our community. Again, I'm going to jump over into Strive, and I'm going to go to Appraisal Settings. And you can always go into the eduphoria community to see if there is a document that you want to use that's different from what you used in the past. So maybe you had it set up one way, you want to make that change for this year. If you find that document that you want, you'll get a preview here of it, and then you're going to click on the Import button. And that's going to bring that document into your system. One of the first things that you want to do when you go into that actual document in your system, so I'm going to go back to evaluation templates, it's going to bring me in here, and I will go and look at, I'm going to look at this one right here. The ones that have the asterisk are usually ones that were created by eduphoria. Sometimes districts put an asterisk at the beginning of theirs, but usually that means it came from us. But you may find a document that you want to use that is not created by us, and it may not be tagged, or it may use a system that you're thinking might not be able to connect to the framework so that you can get that data out of it. But you can do that. So I've got a document here that I brought in from the community, and I need to select the framework to tie it to my summative panel, to tie it to the reports, and to tie it to the appraisal analysis. So it's the framework that ties all of those things together. So I'm going to say this document called Secondary Instructional Rounds, and I can preview it so you'll see what that looks like. It's a checkbox kind of document. So it has different checkboxes for different areas that the appraiser would check off while they're in the room. I like the document, but I want to get the data out of it. So I'm going to go ahead and tie it to the T-PESS framework. And now I need to tie those questions to the specific dimensions. So I'm going to go in and edit my template, and I'm going to look at each one of my areas. Under lesson plans, my choices are differentiated for individual learners. This would be a conversation to have with your curriculum team and your appraisal team, but if I'm the queen of the universe, then I'm going to say this one ties to 2.4 differentiation, and I'm going to tag it with that dimension and click the update version. And so now whenever I run a report on 2.4, any information from this walkthrough template, from this question, will show up in that report. When I look at instructional strategies are aligned to instructional goals, I might determine that that is standards and alignment and update that one. Again, this would be a conversation to have with your team to make sure that you're in agreement on the interpretation of how these elements relate to the T-test dimensions. But if I'm engage students in high-level cognitive activity, I'm going to say that's 1.4 activities and update. So I would go through each of the elements of my template here, and I'm going to understand what they're expected to do and learn during the lesson. Is that achieving expectations? Then I would click 2.1 and update. Again, I would just go through this entire document, and for each item, I'm going to determine which dimension it's related to. If I have a document that uses a matrix question, like this here, then I'm going to have to look at my rows, and each one of these will need to be tagged to a dimension. In this case, I already have it tagged, but if I didn't, I would double click to get it in the edit box up here. And then from this drop down, I would determine which dimension I'm picking for that. And I would say update row. And then I would see that dimension 1.1 standards and alignment beside that row. So whatever type of question it is, you'll find the dimensions list. With the matrix questions, it's going to be this drop down. With the checkbox questions, you'll just be able to see them all. And the same is true for comments questions. If I wanted to tag the evidence, then I would come down here and just check off the dimensions that were related to that evidence. But I want to make sure that everything in my template is tagged to the dimensions here, because this is how it shows up on the reports. This is what makes it show up in the appraisal analysis and in the summative panel. Okay, so we talked about selecting the templates and we talked about tagging them. One thing that you need to be thinking about at this point to get everything out you want at the end of this year is the new T-PESS. There is a new T-PESS system that takes effect in August. We have already created the framework and pushed it out. So when you go and look in your system and you go to frameworks, you already have T-PESS new. So this is the new framework with the new domains and dimensions that apply to administrators starting in August, and we pushed it out to all of our schools. We've also created an article, and I'm going to jump to that article really quickly. You have that link in the Q&A if you want to look at it. But in that article, we have a video that's going to walk you through the process of creating the new evaluation or new appraisal, appraisee type and evaluation process for your principals. And you'll do one for principals and one for APs. In this framework, they use the same framework for both principals and APs, but they have different criteria on the evaluation documents. So the questions are slightly different based on the role of principal or assistant principal. So that's why you need to be able to separate those out. In the old one, there was no difference. You could use the same documents for both assistants and principals. In the new documents, there are some differences. So this article will walk you through the process and show you what it should look like as you're building it. And it also has the list of all of the templates that we have in our community that you can pull in and add to your process. So we've created all the documents that you'll need. We've pushed out the frameworks, and all you have to do is go in and build your process, create your appraisee type, and add all of your steps in there. So we have an article there that will show you how to do that and get you set up so that you'll have that ready to go for your principals and assistant principals in the start of the new year. This slide, but it does go over all of the things that I talked about in terms of making sure that you've selected the framework for any templates that you bring in, and that you've also tagged all of your questions. This one I showed an example of a checkbox question. This shows an example of a matrix question and how you would double click on this to get your question up here, and then you would select the dimension from the drop-down box below it. Okay, so we're going to talk about goals for just a minute, and I want to talk about professional goals first, and then I'll see if I can answer the question that we had about the student growth goals and the portfolio. So you want to make sure that you're tying the goals into the framework. When I showed the summative panel, we could see that goal up at the top. We could see what template or what dimension it was tied to. That's because that goal was created using our professional goal task type. I know that there are some legacy documents out there from back in the PDOS days and even early appraise days that are not using our task type, the professional goal. And while they still function as a place to record a goal, they miss out on some of the data collection that you can have by using our professional goal task type. Because when you set up the goals for teachers and for your principals and assistant principals, when you set those goals up to be the professional goal task type, then the teachers, when they're creating that goal, they are going to select the dimensions that are related to their goal. And the appraiser, before approving that goal, is going to look at those dimensions and say, yes, I agree, those are the correct dimensions for this goal. And then once those are selected, all of that information is going to show up in the summative panel, and you'll be able to see that tied to that particular dimension because it was selected in the goal. In terms of the student growth goal, let me go back over here to my principal, and I'm going to go back to the main summative panel. So I'm not in any particular dimension. When I scroll down to the bottom, I will be able to see the student growth goal here in the summative panel as well. It is not tied, the student growth goals are not tied to the dimensions in T-PESS, so they're not going to show up, you know, like the professional goal showed up under 1.3 up here at the top. But student growth goals are tied to specific skills, so specific TEKs, not dimensions. So they show up at the bottom of that summative panel, but I can still open that goal just like I could open my professional goal, and I can see all of the evidence that's been collected. I can see all of the work that was done and whether or not this teacher thinks they have completed that goal. Also, if you are using the student portfolio, and not the student portfolio can be used in a lot of different ways. A lot of our districts that are writing SLOs and following the state's model are using the student portfolio because it lets you create a rubric with those milestones. I'm going to show you an example of one here, but if I have my teachers using that portfolio, then when I'm doing the summative panel, I can come in here and look at that snapshot. I can expand it and see how many milestones did they have, and then I can see of their group of students, how many of them exceeded expected growth, how many of them met expected growth, and then if I had any orange in my line here, that would be students who did not meet growth. Right now, this teacher has 6 students in her student growth goal group or her SLO group that have not been scored for their overall growth. So this is something that the appraisers can see when they are looking at that summative panel. They can open up and see that as well. There's also a report. If you want to get data about the student growth goals, there is a report that you can use. When I go into appraisal reports, it is called the Student Details Spreadsheet Export, which is a mouthful. When I run this report, I have 2 choices. I can run it for my professional goals, or I can run it for the student growth goals. There's value in both of those. The professional goal option at the beginning of the year will let you see what dimensions your teachers are focusing on, and then you can group them together based on those dimensions, or you can try to find some professional development based on the dimensions that they're working on. But it kind of gives you a snapshot of everything that's happening on your campus. And then for the student growth goals, it's again going to tell you who's working on what area. It's also a good report for you to be able to determine when you need to evaluate them, because you'll know what prep or what class period is involved in their student growth goal. But I can also come in here and say I want to include student growth goal portfolio data. This is going to be that snapshot information or that student portfolio information that will show up in the report. I don't know how much data is going to show up in this from my demo site because it's fake teachers, but I can at least show you that we have, that's not it, there we go, that we have a couple of teachers in here. You can see what their goal statement is. So here's my success criteria. Here's my goal statement. So I'll be able to see, yeah, this is demo data, sorry. But you'll at least be able to see what their goal was, how they're going to measure that goal, And then when I scroll over, this is that demographic data and those growth scores that will come in if I check that little box. So it'll tell me what's the demographic makeup of the students who were part of this student growth goal. And also it will do the math for you of the percentage that met expected growth and there's percentage that exceeded expected growth. So I'll get that percentage added together in this column that you can use. That's one of the requirements for TIA. It's also good information for everybody, but it is a requirement if you're participating in TIA that you have that percentage, and this is one way that you can get that information. So we also want to have professional development show up in the summative panel, and we want to be able to get some reports based on dimensions. And to do that, you need to tag those dimensions when you're creating courses as well. So I'm going to go back into the system, but this time I'm going to go to workshop settings instead of appraisal settings, and I'm going to go look at a course. If I were building a new course, I would do the tags as I go, but I can even go back in and say, I just learned about this, but I want to include all of this for my next year's data. So I'm going to go to my June courses, which count toward next year, and I'm going to go in and tag those as well. So I can take this course that's already happened. I can go to my setup, go to the course description, and I can go to course dimensions. And there's going to be a list here of all of the T-test dimensions. So I would check off. I'm always going to give them professional development credit because it is PD, but I would also check off what are the other things that happen here. So I might say this one is all about activities. It might also be about content, knowledge, and expertise. And then I would want to save that. If I'm creating a new course, again, I'm just going to copy a new one just so it'll go faster. So if I copied that same section, we're going to offer it again later on for the teachers who couldn't come in June. So maybe the second one is going to happen in July. And then it's going to ask me when I build a new course for those framework dimensions. It's going to copy over the same ones that I had in my previous session. But if this was a brand new course that I was creating from scratch, then this list would be blank and I would just go in and select the ones that apply to this particular course. So you want to tag those dimensions in every session that you create so that as a user, I can go in. First of all, there'll be reports that you can run to see what professional development related to what dimensions. But if I'm searching, I'm going to go into the course catalog and I wrote a goal that is related to activities, and I need some help with that. I'm going to click on 1.4 and I'm going to see, okay, here are 2 sessions that my district is offering that are tagged to 1.4. So whatever I wrote my goal related to, whatever dimensions my goal is on, I can find professional development that's tagged to that particular dimension. That's going to help your teachers to find that professional development that is relative to what they need to be working on, what they decided they were going to work on, what their appraiser approved them to work on by searching for it by dimensions. Okay, there are a couple things that are not necessarily related to reporting, but they are related to getting the results that you want. And so I want to talk about those here sort of toward the end. One is copying data from the observations to the summatives. I've shown you how you can get all of the data in the summative panel, and all of those comments are drag and drop into the document from the summative panel. But if you want the results to copy over, there are a couple of things you have to do to make that happen. The first is that you need to go into your system and you need to go to the template, the summative template, not the observation document, but the summative document where you want the copy to land. You'll go to that summative document, you'll go to the middle tab where it says template options, and you need to check the box that says import existing evaluation data when summative is created. So that has to be turned on in order for it to work. And then when I go in as a principal, and I'm going to go back to my campus view, I'm going to go in to do a summative. So when I go in to create that new summative document, there is a box here that says copy existing observation data into my summative evaluation. That box won't be there unless I have checked the setting. Once I have checked the setting, that doesn't automatically copy it over. The appraiser still has to say, yes, I want to copy. Maybe on some teachers I do, and on some I don't. But the appraiser has to go ahead and check this box in order for that data to copy over. And then when I copy over, I will see results already marked in my document. So I'll see those things have copied over. There's also a second piece. So that's why it said number one, set up the template. The second thing is that the observation document and the summative document have to match. They have to be the same format. So when I look at templates, sometimes there will be a template that has, like the example that I was just looking at, when I preview it, it has one dimension, it has a place for you to put the evidence, and then a place for you to rate that evidence. And then it goes on to the next dimension, has a place for that evidence, and then you rate that evidence. There is another format. So this format has you put in all the evidence for each of the dimensions. And then after the evidence is in, you rate all of that evidence. So if my observation was one at a time, evidence, rating, and my summative was evidence, and then the ratings, that doesn't match. And so the document is not going to copy over from observation to summative because the format of the document, even though the information is the same, it's in a different order, the format doesn't match, and it's not going to be able to copy that over. So the second part is for you to make sure that your observation and your summative match. If they don't, then the easiest way to fix that is to go in and take your observation document. So you'll find the observation that you're going to copy. You're going to set up and say you want to do a new summative. So you'll create a new summative, and then you have the option of creating from blank or copying, and you're going to choose to copy. I'm going to go through that over here. So I'm going to go to my evaluation templates. I'm going to come down here and say I want to create a new template. I want it to be a summative, and I'm going to call it matching the observation. And I would say next. I'm going to tell it I want to copy an existing template, not create from blank, and click next. And then I can find that observation document that I'm using, and I can copy that over. So I would choose this one right here and copy it over. When I copy it, the format is going to be the same. So I know that they're going to match. The only thing left to do is add in domain 4, which doesn't exist in an observation document, and also to add in the student growth measurement, which does not exist in an observation document. So this will get you the majority of the way there. It will get you a template that matches the same process as your observation, but you will need to add in domain 4 and the student growth piece at the end if you make a copy from an observation. But that has to happen so that the format of the observation and the format of the summative match so that that document can copy over. Another thing you want to think about as you're setting things up is document locking. This is a feature that is used primarily with non-teachers because teachers can't see each other's documents. That's never an issue, but it is sometimes an issue with assistant principals. It depends on the roles and rights, what rights you have given them. Sometimes the rights that you give them allow them to see each other's documents, and that's not something that you want. So we do recommend for any of your T-PESS documents that you enable locking. You would actually go into the individual document itself. So I would go to the assistant principal's end of year evaluation document, and then I would go to template options, and I would check this box that says allow appraisers to lock the instrument. Again, this is the allow button, but the administrators will have to click the button in the document that says it will say view is unlocked. They'll click it and then it should say view is locked. And when it says view is locked, then nobody can see that document except for the appraiser and the staff member being evaluated. So that's just like an extra layer of security to keep anybody from seeing documents that you don't want them to see. It doesn't always, you don't always have that issue. It just depends on how your district is using roles and rights. So this is that extra layer of security in case one of your roles or rights causes that overlap. Another thing to think about before you start the year is electronic signatures. What documents do you want to have signed, and are we set up to make sure that that's going to happen? So there are 3 parts to setting up electronic signatures. The first part is at the district level. In the management application, electronic signatures has to be enabled for your district. Then it has to be enabled for each application. So the Strive manager will need to go in, and under general options, they'll need to turn on electronic signatures for Strive. And then the third step is to enable it for individual templates. So it's not an all or nothing thing. You can have some documents that require signature, some documents that do not. So you would go into the individual template, just like we have for these other settings, go to template options and turn on or enable electronic signatures. Unlike the other 2 that we've just looked at, enabling electronic signatures is not allowing them to, it's actually turning it on. So once you enable electronic signatures, it will be required for this particular document. The electronic signatures piece is a 2-step process. The appraisee has to sign, and also the appraiser has to sign. So you might want to think about what all do we need to have electronic signatures for. A lot of districts enable electronic signatures for the formal observation and the summative documents, but they don't enable signatures for every walkthrough, for the pre-conference, post-conference documents, things like that. So that's a conversation, again, that's part of that checklist process, that meeting that you have with your team to determine what you want to have signed and what you think does not need to be signed. Once you've enabled that for each one of the documents, the process kind of has four parts to it. I'm going to come over here and try to show it in the system. So I'm going in as a teacher, and I'm going to go to my end of the year document, and it tells me here that an electronic signature is required on this document. So when I go to look at it, I can see that it's required. When I click to view the document, up in the upper right-hand corner, I will see a sign icon. So once I have looked over my document and seen what my appraiser says, I can click here to sign it. When I click to sign, it's going to show me that 2 people have to sign this document. I'm one of them, my appraiser is the other. The recommended order of things is that the teacher signs first, because once the principal has signed, that document is locked. It cannot be reopened. It cannot be edited. It cannot be changed. So you want to make sure that the teacher signs first. The teacher can unsign if something needs to change. So I'm going to go in and say, I'm going to sign my document. All of your teachers will have had to set up a security question in their profile before they can use electronic signatures. It tells you what your question is, but they chose that question from a drop-down list. So not everybody has to put a nickname in there. There are tons of other questions, just like your banking system has. And you pick the question you want, it'll just display it for you here. So I would enter my eduphoria username, my eduphoria password, and the answer to my nickname question. And then I have to click this button, not the enter key. I have to click this button. So I'm going to click this button, and it's going to show that I have signed by putting that check mark there. If I double click on that, once I've signed it, I could clear my signature out. So if my administrator, I sign it and we have a conversation and my administrator says, yeah, you're right about that, I'm going to change that on your document, I can unsign it. They can make the changes. I can sign it again. But that is not the case once the principal has signed. So you want to make sure that the principal doesn't sign until all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted, and we know that it's the final version of that document. And then the principal would do the same thing. Click on the signature. Oh, it's waiting for me. I can't see that because I'm the teacher, but I can go back in after any changes are made and I can sign that document again. Now my administrator can sign it. Once both check marks are there, then that document is complete and it's locked. So again, 4 steps to the process. When I go in as a teacher, I'll see that the signature is required. When I open the document, I'll click on my sign button. I will click on my name to enter my signature. I'll put my password or my security question answer here, and then I will click this button. I will not hit the enter key, because if I hit the enter key, it's going to give me just a blank white screen. I need to click this button in order for the signature to go through.
Paige, we do have a question regarding that real quickly.
Okay.
It's if a teacher signs a document and the principal then changes it, does it clear the teacher's signature?
No. And I don't believe that. I believe they're going to have to ask the teacher to unsign the document before they can make the change.
Gotcha. Okay.
So once the teacher signs it, it's semi-locked. It's locked, but not unlockable. So the administrator would have the conversation with the teacher and say, okay, unsign your document. I'll make the changes. Then the teacher would sign, and then the administrator would sign. Once the administrator has signed, it's locked and it is unlockable. So if the teacher signs, it can be undone. Once the administrator signs, it cannot be undone. I want to talk about help just a little bit. As always, we want to make sure you know where you can find additional information. So in our online help guide, all of the things that we've talked about, setting up the summative document to copy, all of the getting templates from the community, all the things we've talked about today are here in evaluation and goal setting and professional learning tasks in an article that is in our Strive section under setup tasks for Strive appraisal administrators. So you can go to our online help guide and find that information there. If we have any final questions today, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, if you think of something after we get off the call today, or just as you're working, you can always send those questions to training@eduphoria.net. Or if you thought of other questions that are totally unrelated to today's topic, you can also send those to training@eduphoria.net. And one of our team members will get back to you as soon as we can. As for upcoming webinars, last week Joel used the expression hiatus. You know how your favorite TV shows go on hiatus for the summer? Well, we are kind of doing that as well. We are using our summertime to plan for fall webinars. And so as soon as we get some of those webinars planned and scheduled, you'll see them showing up in our online help guide under training and webinars. So we're working on that now, and we'll have more topics lined up for you in the fall. If there is a topic that you are particularly keen on getting some more information about, you can also send that to training@eduphoria.net, and we'll take that under advisement as we do our summer planning. And then just a reminder that we do record all the webinars. You will get a link to the recording when you get your follow-up email after today, but you can always go to this link, which was in the Q&A for today also. This is our YouTube channel. It's going to jump in with Jason talking right away. So we'll have, there's always going to be one that's showing up at the top, but we have playlists created. And if you scroll through, there is a webinars playlist. So I can click on the all webinars playlist and find that list of webinars. The one that I mentioned earlier that we did last week that was connecting data to actions in Strive goes a little bit more into some of the reports and the different things that you can get out of Strive. If you're interested in seeing that one and weren't able to attend last week, you can always find it here in our YouTube channel. So even if you didn't register for some previous webinars, but you would like to have the ability to look at them, check out our all webinars playlist. We also have playlists for each one of our applications. Are there any last questions, Alicia, before we sign off?
No, there are no more questions.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time, and I hope you have a great summer and that we'll see you in our fall webinars when we get up and running in August.